Imagine walking into a village where fires are still burning. Meals are half-cooked on tables, and sewing needles are still threaded with work left unfinished. But there's not a single human being anywhere. No voices, no footsteps, just complete silence. This is exactly what happened at Lake Anjikuni in northern Canada, where an entire Inuit community vanished without leaving a single trace. Today, we're going to uncover one of the most puzzling disappearances in history. Friends, today we're diving into a mystery that has baffled investigators for nearly a century. The Lake Anjikuni disappearance is considered one of the most unexplained mass vanishings in recorded history. What makes this case so extraordinary is not just that people disappeared, but how they disappeared, leaving behind clear evidence that they had been living normal lives just moments before. In this video, I'll walk you through the original testimony, the police investigation, and the various theories that have emerged over the decades. We'll examine the physical evidence that was found at the scene, the government's response, and most importantly, we'll analyze whether this incredible story is actually true or something far more complex. By the end, you'll have all the facts needed to form your own conclusion about what really happened at Lake Anjikuni. Lake Anjikuni sits in the remote wilderness of what is now Nunavut, Canada, approximately 500 miles north of Churchill, Manitoba. This area has been home to Inuit communities for thousands of years, who lived as semi-nomadic hunters and fishermen following traditional seasonal patterns. The lake itself is part of the Kazin River system, surrounded by the harsh but beautiful, the landscape of the Canadian Shield. During the early 1900s, this region was still largely untouched by modern civilization, with small indigenous communities maintaining their ancestral way of life. The area was so remote that contact with the outside world came primarily through fur traders and trappers who would visit seasonally. These communities typically consisted of 30 to 100 people living in traditional dwellings, following hunting and fishing cycles that had sustained their ancestors for generations. Life was harsh but predictable, governed by the rhythms of Arctic seasons and the migration patterns of caribou and other wildlife. The Inuit people of this region were known for their remarkable survival skills and deep knowledge of the unforgiving northern environment. They lived in small, tight-knit communities where everyone knew each other, making the idea of an entire village simply vanishing seem impossible. European contact in this area was minimal, limited mainly to Hudson's Bay Company trading posts and occasional government officials. The remoteness of the region meant that weeks or even months could pass without any outside contact, which becomes crucial to understanding how such a disappearance could go unnoticed for an extended period. The story begins on a cold November day in 1930 when Joe LaBelle, an experienced fur trapper who had been working in northern Canada for years, approached the small Inuit village near Lake Anjikuni. LaBelle knew this village well. He had stopped there many times during his trapping routes and was familiar with the families who lived there. As he approached, he immediately noticed something was wrong. The village was completely silent. Smoke was rising from the dwellings. No dogs were barking, and no people could be seen going about their daily activities. When LaBelle entered the village, he discovered a scene that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Cooking pots were still hanging over fire pits with food inside, though the fires had long since died out. In the women's quarters, he found sewing projects that appeared to have been abandoned in the middle of a stitch. Needles were still threaded, and fabric was laid out as if someone had just stepped away for a moment. Personal belongings, including valuable items and warm clothing essential for survival in the Arctic, had been left behind, untouched. Most disturbing of all, LaBelle found several sled dogs that had starved to death, still tied to their posts. The dogs' condition suggested they had been abandoned for weeks. Even more puzzling was the discovery of a grave that appeared to have been recently opened. Though the stones around it remained undisturbed, ruling out animals as the cause. LaBelle, despite his experience in the wilderness, was deeply shaken by what he found. He immediately traveled to the nearest Royal Canadian Mounted Police outpost to report the mysterious abandonment. The RCMP took his report seriously and launched an investigation that would yield more questions than answers. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigation began immediately after LaBelle's report. A team of officers traveled to the remote village to examine the scene firsthand. What they found confirmed LaBelle's account, but raised even more disturbing questions. The police determined that the village had been abandoned for approximately 8 weeks before LaBelle's arrival. Based on the condition of food, the state of the deceased dogs, and other physical evidence. However, they found no tracks leading away from the village, no signs of struggle, and no indication of where the inhabitants might have gone. This was particularly puzzling because moving an entire community in Arctic conditions would require significant preparation and would inevitably leave traces. The investigation revealed that approximately 30 people had been living in the village, including men, women, and children. Their personal belongings, including essential survival gear like warm clothing, hunting equipment, and food supplies, remained in their dwellings. This was especially strange because no one in the Arctic would voluntarily leave behind items necessary for survival. The police also confirmed the mysterious grave that had been disturbed, but they could not determine how or why it had been opened. Despite expanding their search to cover a wide area around the lake, the RCMP found no trace of the missing villagers. They interviewed other indigenous communities in the region, but no one had seen the missing people or had any knowledge of where they might have gone. The case was officially classified as unsolved, and despite periodic reviews over the decades, no new evidence has emerged to explain what happened to the people of Lake Anjikuni. The RCMP files on the case remain one of the most puzzling, unsolved mysteries in Canadian law enforcement history. Over the decades, numerous theories have emerged to explain the Lake Anjikuni disappearance, ranging from the plausible to the extraordinary. The first theory suggests a natural disaster or sudden weather event that forced the community to evacuate quickly. However, this doesn't explain the lack of tracks or the abandonment of essential survival gear. Arctic communities were well prepared for sudden weather changes and would not leave without their most important possessions. Another theory proposes that the community was relocated by government authorities as part of early Indigenous resettlement programs. While the Canadian government did conduct some relocations during this period, there are no official records of any government involvement with the Lake Anjikuni community, and such operations typically involved documentation and advanced planning. Some researchers have suggested that the villagers may have followed migrating caribou herds and became lost or trapped in harsh weather. This theory has merit because indigenous communities did sometimes relocate based on hunting opportunities. But again, it doesn't explain why they would leave behind essential supplies or why no trace of them was ever found. More controversial theories include suggestions of alien abduction, supernatural intervention, or secret government experiments. While these explanations capture public imagination, they lack credible evidence and seem to arise more from the mysterious nature of the disappearance than from factual investigation. Perhaps the most significant challenge to all these theories came from researchers who began questioning whether the disappearance actually occurred as reported. Some investigators have pointed out that many details of the story come from newspaper accounts of the 1930s, and original source documentation is limited. Skeptical researchers like Brian Dunning have suggested that the entire story may be an example of urban legend or sensationalized journalism from the era, pointing out that no independent verification of the village's existence before its supposed abandonment has been found in historical records. After examining all available evidence and theories, the truth about Lake Anjikuni remains elusive, but several important facts emerge from our investigation. First, while Joe LaBelle was a real person and fur trapper, there has been no verification of him ever coming across a real village. Second, the primary sources were books and some newspaper articles from the 30s, but none of them can confirm that the mysterious story of Lake Anjikuni is true. Critical analysis suggests that the legend of the disappearing Inuit village of Anjikuni Lake turns out to be simple pulp fiction. This doesn't necessarily mean nothing unusual happened, but it does mean we must approach the story with healthy skepticism. The discrepancy in dates is also significant. While the original story is set in 1930, many modern retellings incorrectly place it in 1951, showing how details can become distorted over time. What we can say with certainty is that the Lake Anjikuni story has become a modern legend that captures our fascination with unexplained mysteries. Whether based on a real event that was later embellished or created entirely from imagination, it serves as a perfect example of how extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The story also highlights the importance of verifying sources and distinguishing between documented history and compelling folklore. What do you think about this mystery? Do you believe there might be some truth behind the legend, or do you think it's entirely fictional? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let me know what other unexplained mysteries you'd like me to investigate. If this video made you question what you thought you knew about this famous disappearance, then you'll definitely want to see my next video where we'll explore other supposed mass disappearances that turned out to have surprising explanations. Don't forget to like this video if you found it informative, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. Remember, the truth is often more complex than the legend, but that's what makes the investigation so fascinating.